All right, we're back. The Victory Degree Podcast, another day, another interview. Today, I am truly, truly honored. I typically say that I'm always honored whenever I have a podcast guest, but today it's a little bit different because I'm joined by a man who served this country and a man who was nice enough to give us some of his time today, Rorke Denver. Rorke, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, brother.
So many different ways that we can go about this, but I figure, and it's funny, we were just before the podcast, before we started officially recording, we were talking about water polo and your experience there and growing up in the Bay Area and all that fun stuff. So I figured for the audience to kind of truly appreciate your journey and who you are, maybe let's start there. Let's start off with the Bay Area. Growing up, who was Rorke Denver?
Yeah. Well, you know the area because you grew up in similar environs. I was born in San Francisco. My parents were both East Coast kids that came west. And born there, right in the heart of Silicon Valley, moved down to Los Altos, which now, if you haven't sold a .com, you're not buying 3/4 acre worth of dirt, let alone a house. But it was normal then. It's like in my era growing up there, I mean, Los Altos was like apricot orchards and a normal place to grow up. It was definitely nice. It wasn't like I grew up in the mean streets of Los Altos, but it was nothing like what it's become in the Bay. Politically, expense, the insanity of that place, the traffic, the people. It's a wild environment. But no, it was a great place to grow up. I love sports. California. Somebody from Texas or Florida is going to hear this and be very upset, but I don't think California has a tremendous amount of competition on sports. I mean, just the amount of sports we play, the amount of athletes. Look, we have great weather every day, so you get to play every day. And so it's a pretty idyllic place to grow up if you're a good athlete. And I played everything growing up, just like, most kids did when we went through. Now everybody's like specializing from age 3 and getting overuse injuries because they're not doing multiple sports. But, I played them all. And then I really found my footing in the pool and in water polo. And then lacrosse came a little bit later. And strangely, in some ways, I thought for sure I was going to play water polo in college. And then I just really got, it was kind of a new shiny toy playing lacrosse. And then I got lucky enough to get recruited by really one of the blue blood programs back at Syracuse and play there. But great upbringing in NorCal. Amazing parents. I was very, very lucky. Great younger brother. My mom's kind of a big dreamer and sort of an artsy person, and my dad's very disciplined and focused. And so, my brother and I kind of benefited from both those methodologies. And went from the Bay Area back east, which no one had really done at that point in the lacrosse world. Now you got kids from Oregon and Texas and all over the place playing at an elite level. Back then it was like, you're from where? I probably was the only kid on a D1 roster that said California, and got very, very lucky in my timing. I mean, we were in the Final Four all 4 years. We won the national championship twice when I was there. I ended up a captain and an All-American my senior year. So pretty unbelievable opportunity to play at that level. And then that's when, the Navy kind of came calling. I didn't have a long-standing military plan, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do leaving school. A bunch of buddies wanted to go down to New York and get into finance and make their fortune, and it just had no appeal to me. I still wanted to play rough and do that. And my dad sent me a book written by Winston Churchill, an autobiography, and that book was just like the spark to serve. And then did a bunch of research on the unit. I heard the hardest or the different units in the special operations world, and the one that at least said had the hardest attrition rate, the most people quit was SEAL training. And since I felt pretty confident about my ability in the water, I was like, that looks like the spot for me. And it proved to be true. So yeah, that was kind of the path to here, the Navy. And then obviously there's plenty more, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Couple questions. First of all, did playing water polo, for those who have not played water polo, by the way, very difficult sport. I just encourage you to go to YouTube and look up, somebody playing water polo. Like, it looks difficult, and I guarantee you it's 10 times harder than it looks. So very difficult.
Yeah, look at the underwater view.
Yeah, a lot of crazy stuff happens there. Did playing water polo and having exposure to a difficult sport like that help you at all, or kind of guide you to becoming a SEAL, or was it like, what did you learn from playing difficult sports growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think without question, I mean, the one thing that the SEAL community is always trying to figure out in many ways is how can we grow or create more SEALs? I mean, we need people to fill the boots of the folks leaving on, and we need top level performers to do that. And it's a little bit of witchcraft, it's a little bit of magic, it's a little bit of stuff you can imagine, grit, resilience, mindset, all these things are super important. The only thing they've ever been able to identify as an absolute, if you have this in your background, you have a better chance, not a much better chance, but a better chance, is playing one of about 5 sports: water polo, lacrosse, wrestling, it's like rugby and, maybe triathlon or something like that. So it's a lot of sports that have a lot of suffering and a lot of long training sessions and kind of combative mindset type games. And the type of games that are easy to quit, that not a lot of people. And look, water polo is not a fun sport until you get pretty dang good at it, and then you're still putting out hard. You're either swimming or you're fighting. That's what you do in water polo. So no, I think without question, sports was a great launch pad. And I never. People talk about SEAL training a lot. That everybody at some point is going to think about quitting. It never occurred to me, and I don't have something I think radically different than somebody else. I don't think my genetics are different. I'm big and strong and I could take a hit, so that didn't hurt. But no, it was, look, I've been miserable before. Let's go ahead and be miserable again. You jump in a morning swim workout in February in Northern California. You think that place might be warm. It ain't in the morning when you're jumping in the pool. So, all that stuff were precursors, to I think having success. Yeah. Yep.
Prior even to water polo, was there anything, were there any tendencies that maybe your parents or even your brother picked up on that maybe could have told them, like, hey, this guy might be wired a little bit different? You say you're not special. I view you to be very special, but
No, I appreciate it.
Is there anything that kind of, that early on people could have said, Rorke has this different type of mindset?
Yeah, my dad tells a story. I don't remember this, but my dad tells a story in like my first year of youth soccer. So like your basic, what was it, AYSO youth California soccer, where you get drafted by a bunch of teams. They're picking you out, and dad coaches it. It's not elite level of play. But I played on a team that actually had a really good season. We made it to the playoffs, and we finished that game, and we're in a shootout. And I'm probably, I think dad was trying to remind me, let's call it 6, 7, somewhere in there, 6, 7, maybe 8 years old, somewhere in there. And the coach's son was on the team. And the way the penalty kicks worked is it was 5 penalty kicks, but they could actually, in that level, you didn't have to have different people take the penalty kicks. You could have one kid take them all, or you could have 5 people take them all. And the dad let his son take the first 3, and he missed all 3. The other team made 2 out of 3. I took the last 2. I buried them both, scored both of them, and I came walking off. The other team scored 1 more, moved on. But as my dad describes it, I walked off, and I was like, if he'd let me take them all, we would have won. Like, just very casually, not like braggadociously. It just was like, dude, why didn't you let me do that? Like, I'm not going to miss it. And which wasn't necessarily the truth, but I think he was kind of like, there's a confidence and a competitive mindset at an age that normally isn't there, and nothing he did to make that happen. He always made my brother and I work very hard. He's like, one thing we were good at is like, he's like, look, you might be good with your strong hand, use your weak hand. Learn these, these weaknesses in your game to get better, and always be willing to work harder than anybody else. So that's not insignificant. But I think little things like that. I just think I was a very natural athlete. I was always a leader. I was always a captain on every team I was on. And I think look, if you're the best player on the team, often that's just sort of who becomes the captain. But I also think I worked hard. I never was going to be a bad example to somebody. I'd go hard on sprints. I'd stay extra. I'd do what I needed to do to not only make myself better, but set an example. And so I think I always found myself in these roles of kind of growing leadership. So I think it was some of that stuff. And then, like I said, it wasn't a rough town, but if there's a bully around, I'd go hunt them. I didn't like people picking on people. Somebody messed with my brother. They were in a deep end of the pool very quickly, and all my brother and his little skateboarding friends knew. They kind of had my protection, and now my brother's probably scarier than I am physically. He's a beast. But yeah, I just think it was probably little markers that and my dad's a big literary guy, big reader. So my brother and we loved the big epics. We loved Tolkien and The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and the Narnia series, and Hannibal bringing the elephants over the Alps to win battles, and then Scipio Africanus figuring out, all right, there's no way to beat war elephants. Well, yep, when they charge, we'll open paths that the warrior elephants will go through because they're going to pick the easiest path, and then we'll get them behind us and win. Like, these things super appealed to me, the Greek mythology and stuff like that. So I think there are markers. Yeah. Yep.
What's your because as I talk to athletes and coaches and everyone in between, everybody has a different opinion on this idea of competitiveness, and you even see in entrepreneurship. There's people that say, well, Steve Jobs was just built different. He was competitive unlike anybody else. Or like nowadays people say the same thing about Elon Musk and his willingness to really win at all costs. And take your favorite entrepreneur, favorite athlete, favorite coach. Yeah. There's some people that have a different level of competitiveness. From your experience, do you think that most of that is nature or nurture?
It's a good question. I would say, I don't know if I've been asked that about the specific level of competitiveness. When people ask me that question, what gets asked a lot, are leaders born or are they made? I really do think it is both. I mean, I think people have a natural proclivity towards leadership, a confidence, an aura about them that they develop, a charisma, whatever it might be, that'll probably help them in a leadership journey. And I think they have to refine that and practice it and execute it to get really good at it and be successful. And I would imagine competitiveness has both of those. I would say competitiveness, that very specific trait, I think is born. Because I have 2 kids. And I do remember my mom talking about other markers that I basically ruined every birthday party I had until about the time I was 10. Because if there was a race or a competition or something like that, I would destroy myself to win. And if I didn't win, I'd be beside myself. I mean, just lose it. And my dad wasn't cracking a whip, or they weren't saying, hey, either you win or you don't eat. There was none of that. That's just who I was. And it's always been that way. And I can say legit, it's funny you bring this up. Just yesterday, somebody asked me about competitiveness. I was training with some friends, and they said, you seem pretty competitive. Obviously, you've done all these competitive things. I was like, yeah, it's probably borders on unhealthy. And they're like, do you know anybody more competitive than you? And I could pick, world-class athletes that fall in that category. But there's honestly only 2 people the reason it came up, there's a post of one of my teammates at Syracuse. And I would say he and one other SEAL buddy of mine are the only 2 people I can say noticeably, I'm like, they're actually more competitive than I am. Those two guys. And we're good friends. We get along well. But no, it's almost to an unhealthy degree. But I also think it carried me super far.
Love it. It's interesting to think about, because as I study some, you mentioned world-class athletes. One guy that comes to mind is Michael Jordan, who is arguably the best basketball player of all time. But it's interesting reading about his journey. So he famously hated working hard when he was a kid. Like his mom has been quoted saying,
yep,
like if Jordan didn't play basketball, like if he was working a 9 to 5, he would be the worst employee ever.
Right.
But to him, basketball, the reason he worked so hard at basketball is because he viewed it as a game. He viewed it as something that was fun, that he, again, was just a game that he was playing. And so he put his all into it. But it's interesting to think about, like, certain people who maybe they tell themselves a story of like, oh, I'm not competitive, or, I don't have that drive, but maybe they haven't found that thing that carries them that deep.
Yeah, I like that. I don't disagree. I'm sure that is true. I think when you find a vehicle for your nature and the thing that you kind of have a rhythm and a real passion for, that's when we'll see the real you for the most part. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we're getting back to your journey, because we have a lot to discuss in limited time. So I want to make sure we hit on all this. So you're at Syracuse. So you play water polo in high school. You're at Syracuse. You're playing lacrosse. And you mentioned there was a book from Winston Churchill that kind of started your journey to the SEALs. Lead us through that transition, because going from lacrosse, to the SEALs is quite a big jump. So kind of what way into that?
Yeah, and actually, I bet as I describe this, you'll see the connective tissue between the two, because I actually think lacrosse borders on, I don't know if you can come up with a better sport to transition to the SEAL teams. I'll get to that next, or special operations. But no, I'm in my senior year. I was a fine arts major, so figure I had no chance to put food on the table when I leave Syracuse. I just didn't like math and science, and business, or those things didn't speak to me. So I love literature and history and writing, and so that's what I kind of put my time into. But yeah, my dad sends me a copy of this Winston Churchill book called My Early Life. It really was just a definite line in the sand. I was like, service is going to be where I want to kind of start my adult life, and cut my teeth a little bit, earn my spot at the table. It feels like if you served in this country, you kind of hang your hat later that you put you put your chips on the table for what we enjoy here, and there's lots that can be argued, for and against that, but it proved to be the case for me. But no, I walked into a recruiter's office in Syracuse and said, I want to be a SEAL, I want to be an officer, because I always like being in charge and being a captain and a leader. And we put that paperwork together, and it took almost 2 years. One application I did not get accepted. I don't like no's, so I reapplied immediately. I got accepted the second round, then got to go. And I really do think, to go past basic training, which we'll probably touch on, but when you get to the SEAL teams, if you think about lacrosse, water polo will be another one, but lacrosse in particular it's a combative sport. It's an aggressive sport. You have very specialized positions in lacrosse. I mean, everybody can do a little bit of everything, but you have attackmen, which are specifically offense. You've got defensemen that are specifically defensemen. You've got midfielders that go in between. You got goalies, that's all they do. You now have face-off specialists that just take the face-off to start the game and move it on. That's exactly what a combat unit is. You got your radiomen, your corpsmen, your snipers, your breachers, all these things, but then all have to come together and see the field the same way and complete the mission and complete the task. So I don't know if you could play a much better sport to go into a combat unit or a military unit with how a successful team in lacrosse is very similar to a successful team in special operations. So it was a great preparation. It was a great preparation. I'd say the thing that I really recognized was, and it's probably too long a story, but I love the grind and the suffering. Like preseason when you're doing wind sprints and suicides and all the nightmare stuff, I love that. Like people would drag in to the Carrier Dome to do those, and I'd be like jumping through the door. And coach even talks about it. I'd finish some of those and he'd see me go off on an extra run because I'd like hurting. I just enjoyed it, So when I kind of got to the SEAL teams, I was like, okay. And it used to confuse me sometimes when I'd look across the field and see people not running as hard as I was running. Not everybody, but some people wouldn't. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you give max out? Like, I literally was like a head scratcher to me. And then I showed up to SEAL teams. I was like, oh yeah, everybody here runs hard all the time. This is my crew. Yeah.
These are your type of people.
Yeah.
You mentioned going into, basically going to a recruiter and saying, hey, I want to be on the SEALs. I'm assuming it's a lot simpler than it sounds. So can you kind of break down how does that process actually unfold? Like when you go up and you say, I want to join the SEALs, what happens next? And then I'm also curious, as kind of a follow-up, your emotions when you're applying to become a SEAL, because I'm assuming that there's maybe some uncertainty there even when you're applying, or maybe you're just full go, like, this is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I've talked about this a lot. You ask good questions. I'm not sure if I've been asked that one. I think, we'll start with what you first asked, which is the process. Anybody that's going to go in the military is either going to go enlisted or officer. For officer programs, you have to have done ROTC at a regular college, which is kind of officer training cadet course, and then you go to your service. The Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, one of the academies, then you go in as an officer. My path was what's called OCS, or Officer Candidate School. So you have a 4-year degree. You've done the college part. Now you go to do this 13, 14-week school to basically, we make fun of it now, but it's kind of knife and fork school. How do you fold your underwear? How do you, march and, kind of become part of the Navy, tuck in your blouse and, polish shoes and all that good stuff. But that stuff's not insignificant. I think people see that, room inspections, they think that's just to harass people. It is very important. It's attention to detail. It's being able to follow instructions. It's being able to meet a directive and a timeline. I mean, all these things are huge building blocks for what we do successfully in the military. So those are the two kind of paths. And then enlisted people can just enlist. They're going to go to, in the Navy, Great Lakes, which is boot camp for the Navy, and then they're going to go to a ship or to whatever their job was. In that era, it was just the time, and now it's remained the case, that we were pretty early where you could apply specifically to be in the Navy, an officer, and get what's called a contract to go to the SEAL teams. And you could also do it to be a pilot, a ship driver, a submariner, whatever you want to be. So that was the real gift for me, is I sort of knew before I signed the dotted line that I was going to go where I want to go. I wasn't going to go and then end up on a ship somewhere, driving a ship around, the Persian Gulf and being like, wow, this is not what I signed up for. So that was a good path for me. The part of the question I really like, because I don't know if I've thought about it much, is was there, trepidation or any hesitancy of it? I don't think so. I think I've kind of always been pretty decisive when I make a choice that I'm going to go. And then I'll adjust if it goes wrong. I mean, Syracuse was a big jump. I mean, if I'd stayed in California and played water polo, I would have hopped in that pool with way more confidence than I did running out of that tunnel the first time for tryouts at Syracuse. I mean, I really knew I was behind a lot of the players I was going to play with, and I'd have to very much fight for a spot, which was the case, and it worked out. But no, I don't really remember. I think once my mind kind of turned on it, it just really felt right. And talking to my dad and some mentors and, my brother, I think everyone's like, makes sense. I mean, you've been on an elite team since day one. You just finished up this elite thing. It seems like a natural progression. And as a leader, I think all of them knew that seems like it would make perfect sense to go do that. But I don't remember really anywhere in there being like, man, did I just sign up for something that I shouldn't have or didn't want to? I think I felt pretty confident that was the right path. And I guess if it hadn't been, I would have found out. It proved to be perfect, to be honest.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I think a lot of people get caught up whenever they're making a decision because they want to avoid making a wrong decision.
Yeah.
And it often, and then it's like this almost like circle of death where like people are scared of making a wrong decision, then they get super fearful, then they never make a decision, and then they get anxiety because they haven't made a decision, and it's like it goes on, and then you're stuck in this loop of
you're dead on.
You can never figure out, like what am I doing with my life? And then 10 years go by, and you're like, well, I'm still in the same spot.
No, you're dead on. And look, I think this is another blessing of sports. Like if you're a shooter, a goal scorer, a performer, you're like, dude, the ball's mine. I'm taking a shot. And there's a lot of people that aren't willing to take a shot, and the teams that are great have a lot of people that are willing to make a choice, take a risk, and go for it, So I think a lot of that were building blocks to that. And I've never had that problem. We teach young officers and gunfighters as they're going through the course. Like I finished my career running training. We're like, we just favor action over inaction. We want you to do something. I mean, to be honest, you can even do the wrong thing. If you do it with like a clear head, a little bit of aggression, and hopefully a sense of humor if it goes wrong, we can adjust off that. What we can't adjust off is you freezing or not doing something. So yeah, that's never been a problem of mine. I kind of feel like, hey, if I have the ball and it's open, I'm going to let it rip. Yeah.
That's a fantastic point. It's actually, so I remember my dad, when I was playing water polo, would always used to tell me, shoot it as hard as you can. If it misses the goal by 20 meters, it does not matter. We can adjust, we can see what you're doing wrong, but just let it rip. Because if you're halfway through to shooting, but then you don't actually follow through, and like you're just not committed.
Yeah.
And then
Go.
No, I was gonna say. And then I watched. I saw on TikTok the other day this famous tennis coach. He was like coaching this like young group of kids, and he was like, "I don't care about your technique. Literally hit the ball as hard as you can. I don't care where it lands. I don't care if it goes outside of the court, wherever. Hit it as hard as you can, and then we will reassess."
Yeah. No, and I think you mentioned earlier, I think Jordan, if I remember right, it's like you miss all the shots you don't take. So it's like, dude, you got to put your hat in the ring. And if you don't, in my mind, you're going to live a lesser unfulfilled life. And like going for great things and failing, still great. I mean, it's the good stuff, man. I like swinging for the fences for sure.
Makes a great story. At the end of the day, even if you fail, at least you have a story that you can share with your friends and family. So,
you weren't, the Teddy Roosevelt quote of the man in the arena, which I have in my office. I mean, it just is like, be in the arena. You don't want to be a timid soul. That's not what life's about, Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a quote that you mentioned in this book that I believe is one of your favorite quotes as well that we'll get to at the end. That I think will tie a lot of this conversation together and hopefully leave the audience with a little lasting impression.
Cool.
I just want to get timeline here. So when you first go up to the recruiter, what year is this?
Yeah, that would be, so my senior year of college, 1996, spring of 1996.
So 1996, I was born in 97. So a year before I was born, you go up and you're like, I want to become a SEAL.
Yeah.
1996 is a time that is relatively peaceful around the world. It's certainly peacetime, no major conflicts, no world wars.
Yeah. Not with us. Bosnia and that area was kind of falling apart. No majors.
That hits close to home. But did you ever think, like, if America was involved in the war, like, would your decision have changed at all if it was peacetime versus if there was an active conflict?
I don't know. I mean, it was peacetime. I think back then there was nothing you could find about the SEALs. That there was nothing. I mean, they were like Dick Marchenko's book, right? Rogue Warrior, which is just like a wild, pretty self-indulgent, boisterous book, but fun, a great read. And he's a character and one of our legends for sure. But there's so little to find and so little history. Now, if somebody looks at, I mean, movies, books, the annals of history of all these famous SEAL events, and our capacity on the battlefield to include Green Berets and Rangers and the unit and all the special operations that have just. I mean, when history 200 years from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, I mean, they're going to put American Special Operations this window of time right next to the Samurai, the Spartans, the 10th Legion. I mean, it is going to be, wow, this was a different group of warriors that addressed the battlefield over a big block of time. But no, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can't say what I would have felt if it was a time of war. I mean, it's interesting talking to young guys coming in because you're like, hey, you definitely know what you're coming doing. I think the reason I say that is I think everyone that showed up at a SEAL team after basic training when we went through figured you'd show up at the team, they'd kind of not tell you anything for a week, and then they'd probably bring you into some cool room, pull a curtain back, and be like Jason Bourne screams up, and they'd be like, all right, you're going to go murder these 3 heads of state over here and kill these bad guys there. We're running seeking operations. And you're like, there's nothing happening. I mean, people are just, look, they're ready, training. We're going to work out hard. We're going to shoot a lot. We're going to blow things up, get good at jumping and fighting, but there wasn't anything happening. So it was strange to kind of have that experience where you're like, ooh, I thought I'd be on a mission by Christmas, and so it was quiet for a while. I look at that time now so fondly that I had those years before 9/11, a couple just to really make the friendships and connections and train and sharpen the sword really for when it came, because once it came, it was on for a staggering amount of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So you apply to become a SEAL, and what happens next? At what
so
point?
spring of 96, I apply. I didn't realize at the time, but I was at the end of the application cycle. Like if they would accept applications for 6 months, I was like 5 months and 29 days is when my application went in, which probably contributed to me not getting accepted. I mean, it's crazy competitive to get one of those spots, but it was strange because it took maybe 6 months for me to find out I didn't get accepted. So I kind of went through the summer. At the end of the summer, I found out, got a letter that my dad got and said, hey, no easy way to say it. You weren't picked up. Tell me what you want to do, and we'll go from there. And I mean, he knew I'd be reapplying the next day. And so we started doing that. But then I had to find out when the cycle was. So it was another 4 months before I could really apply. And then it took several months for me to hear. And so call it into 97 is when I heard I got selected. So I had a spot. And then it was strange because I was an OCS guy. The detailer, that's the person that basically gives you your job and the timing of things, said, we've got kind of a weird situation. You're just in this pool that we can't really get you started right now. So you have almost 10 months before we can get you to officer school in Florida. Turned out to be a gift. I moved over to Maui. I goofed off on the Hawaiian Islands for 8 months, surfing, training in the water, getting in shape, running every day. And it was just a great place to be, and I enjoyed it. And then from there went to OCS and then Pensacola, Florida. It's now up in Newport, Rhode Island. But you do 13 weeks there, you become an officer, and then very quickly, I mean, within a week and a half, I was out at the front gate at Bud's, getting ready to go.
And so I have to assume that at that point you had heard about Buds and the torture that it is or was back then and still is.
Yeah.
Just what was going on through your head as you're standing there at the entrance and you're like, I'm really about to do this?
I don't think anybody could say they wouldn't have some level of nerves, but I think for the guys that do it well, it was just excited. It was like, hey, I'm getting to open the doors into Sparta and a training program that is, revered and feared and something worth sinking your teeth into. I didn't have fear. I mean, I didn't have like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I was kind of like, let's go. I mean, I love, like I said earlier, I love those preseason sprints. I'm like, well, I think we're about to find the worst version of that you can find. And to be honest, I enjoyed it. And most of the guys that do that program, as hideous as it is, enjoyed it. My class started with about 185 candidates. We graduated 22. And out of those 22, I know for a fact, because they're buddies of mine, 21 of us knew we were going to be there on that Friday to graduate. We just we're like, we're going to make it. You're going to stop us. You're going to kill us. You're going to drop us. That's the only way we don't see the finish line. I mean, maybe one kid was like, holy shit, I need to call mom. Like, she is not going to believe what Johnny did, but most people that go there are like, what? You can make this twice as hard. Not to take away how hard it is. It's a mindset that I think is, as we described earlier, it's just a different mindset. The people that won't quit no matter what we throw at them, they won't quit. And the people that will quit, we can make it half again as hard and they'd quit. Yeah.
So in the book, which by the way, damn few, highly recommend, you talk about not everyone is physically able to do what you need to do at Buds. There is some baseline that you need to hit. And I think there's some you have to run a mile in a certain amount of time. So lead us kind of through some of those requirements and the numbers that you need to hit.
Yeah, the basic entrance exam has stayed the same since I think the 60s. It's a 500-meter swim for a certain amount of time, pretty fast. I mean, anybody that's a swimmer smokes it, but you got to be moving. You get changed back into, you get out of the pool. You got like 10 minutes. You get boots, pants, t-shirt on. You got to do as many push-ups as you can do in 2 minutes. 2-minute break. You got to do as many sit-ups as you can do in 2 minutes, unbroken. 2-minute break. You got to do as many pull-ups in a single set as you can do. And then you got another 5-8 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe you go out to a track and you got to run 1.5 miles for time. And so that's the primary entrance test to get in. You have to pass that. And then when you show up at SEAL training, there's pre-training when you start getting, kind of beat on by the instructors and hitting the surf and wet and sandy and push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups and rope climbs and obstacle courses and all that. Every week of training, from the day you show up there, once you start what's called phase training, first, second, and third phase, every week in a 5-day period, you will have to run a 4-mile timed run, boots and pants in the sand. For a time, you have to make the time standard. You'll do a 2-mile ocean swim, you and your swim buddy, you have to make the standard. And you'll do a timed obstacle course that's on your own, but everybody's going at the same time, and you have to make the standard. The standard lowers every phase, it gets faster. None of those were ever a stress for me. I mean, I was always, in the top, 5, 6 guys. A couple of them swims, I was 1 or 2. But they're challenging standards. They're not for good athletes and folks that are committed to it. You can pass it, and that proves true cycle after cycle after cycle. People that think they can't pass, they can pass. One of my swim buddies, he was a center at the Naval Academy, big dude, great friend of mine to this day. He had failed a bunch of swims and was like beside himself. He's going to get dropped from the program. And I'm like, God, this guy's an animal. Like, the fact that you're passing runs, I can't, because you're a big dude, I can't imagine you can pass swim. So I had a really fast swim buddy, and I said, hey, let's swap today. You swim with him, swim buddy, I'll swim with his. We take off on this swim, we come across the line, and come in to check in with the instructors. And he's got tears in his eyes. I'm like, what are you freaking out about? He's like, we're the last people with nobody here. I was like, look back in the water. We were the number 1 swim pair. He couldn't swim straight. So and I played water polo, so I could come up, pop my head up. We're just good at going where we need to go in the water, So yeah, the course has got tremendous challenge. There are no individual things that are Herculean. I mean, Hell Week in its entirety, horrific, and makes anyone that hasn't quit by then is going to quit that week because it's just hard. But it's mostly jackhammer shivering and not being able to buckle your shirt because you're just so cold, and it plays on your mind and your spirit, not the physicality. The physicality is otherworldly. I mean, I went to Ranger school. I've been with some other elite units, and nobody trains physically like we train. I think that's absolute certainty on just max effort of PT. I think one thing the Army does well, they do a lot more stuff alone, which I think is cool too. Like, they do a lot of things where you're like alone out in the woods, having to work problems and nav sets and horrific environments. You don't know if you're passing or failing, and that plays on a different part of your psyche. So they're different programs, but the amount of physical output can't even be described. It's usually 5 different physical evolutions. So you think of one of your practices in the sport, the hardest one you can imagine, you're doing 5 of those a day at a minimum. And then you finish the day, you actually get to go eat a bunch of chow. Weekends you have off, so you kind of rest, recover, stretch, eat a bunch of good food, and be ready to go again. But it's it's a 6-month program, and then another 6 months before you even get to a team. So I think the duration just plays on people. They just, if they get hurting or behind themselves in their mindset in those first couple days, ooh, it just looks like a long path. Whereas, like I said, the guys that are kind of meant to do that job are basically just excited to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
How much did the training reinforce to you that mindset is everything?
It is easily, and I'm probably underrating it, 90-10 mental to physical.
Wow.
Easily. Now, I say that under the guise or the certainty that you have to be fit to show up there. Like
There's some baseline.
we don't have a
Right.
lot of fatties that show up and are like, I
Right.
really like Dunkin' Donuts, never run before. Let me take a swing at SEAL Train.
Right.
That's what shows. I mean, if you see a whole SEAL class standing there with their shirts off, you're like, that's a fit group of people, So that is a baseline. But the difference between those people that make it and those that don't, I think there's very little physically. You said a little. The one thing, the one failing that you hate to see is just when somebody's body fails. Somebody's shoulders, joints can't take it, stress fractures, something goes wrong, they've got a bad heart, something like that. That's tough to watch when you have a kid that has the mindset, both when you're in the class and then as an instructor. That was brutal to watch a kid that their body just failed them. And you're like, look, it's not going to be for you. You got to be able to take an unbelievable amount of abuse. And I think that's one of the real key kind of traits that we don't think about. And there's not a great way to measure it before you show up at that place, but just how much abuse can your body take? I mean, I'm 51 at this point. I still train hard. I'm still fit. I've only had, one or two kind of shoulder issues. My hips never went. My knees never went. I just didn't break. My body's kind of made to take abuse and sort of always has. And I think I probably undervalued at the time what an advantage that was. Cause I'm sure there are people that are hurting so bad, compared to the way I was feeling.
You mentioned it a couple of times during this interview, but this mindset of I'm never going to quit, and you talked about how even growing up you had the same mindset. It stuck with you all throughout your entire life up to this point. What for people listening to this or maybe watching, like what would your advice be for them to strengthen their mindset, to have the mindset of a SEAL as much as they can, right? Because there's
Sure.
but like how can people start to maybe start thinking differently and to strengthen their mind?
Yeah, look, I think people think there's something secret going on there, that there's, a magic word or some concept or some breathing technique or something you need to do to build that. I think everybody does it a little bit differently. I'm sure there's commonalities, but the thing that's cool about the military that I enjoyed the most is how radically diverse the backgrounds are of people that make it. I mean, I had guys on my team that grew up with a silver spoon, every single advantage put to them, and they showed up that course and quit immediately. And the same kid did great. And then we had kids that came from broken homes, a dad that used to beat them, was an alcoholic, and said, you're never going to amount to anything. They'd be like, hold my beer. And they'd come and do it well. And then people that crashed. So there's something in each person's individual spark, I think, that gets them to a successful place. So that I can't give to anybody. What I would say is, in simple terms, I have two kids. They're both, young. They're heading towards teenage years. I just say, do hard things. Literally practice it. Do hard things. I know that sounds simple. And the best thing about this is, what's hard for you and I is not going to be the same for somebody else. Do what's hard for you. And by that, I mean literally do something that you don't want to do. But that would be good for you. Don't go do drugs. But like whether it's a jiu-jitsu class, I want to learn some challenging skill set. And it doesn't all need to be physical. It could be a mental undertaking. It could be anything. Get a degree, whatever you want to do. But do something that, like, and that's why I think the cold showers and all the cold plunges that people have gotten into, as best I can tell, the science is pretty good that it helps with inflammation and whatever. I think it's just one of those things like, this is terrible. I mean, I made a living in cold water, and I don't like hopping in one of those things, but I do because it's hard. And doing hard things kind of inoculates you to hard things. So I think people work way too hard on figuring out, what's the book, what's the mindset, what's the tactic. The best way in my mind to do it is to do it. Go do hard things, and you'll see if you're a quitter or not. And then when you're doing hard things, look, if you give up, be accountable. Push yourself. Do it with a friend or a buddy that can be like, look, we're both going to do this, and I'm going to give you a hard time if you don't do it. Do the same for me, and let's go push this thing together. That's really the thing. I never had a mantra or anything I used. I mean, I will say this. You have to be an ally to yourself, right? You have to help yourself and be like your own best like advocate. I think anytime something got challenging in SEAL training, but certainly in my life, my mind told me, yeah, but someone else, what one man can do, another man can do. So there's no reason I can't do that. And so my mind was like, it's going bad today. I'm just going to keep swinging away. I'm just going to keep fighting, and it'll get better tomorrow or 2 days from now. I imagine the person whose brain was saying, you're not good enough. You're worthless, just like people told you were. You can't do it. I don't know how you get past that. You can't be that person. It's one thing we nip in the bud immediately with our daughters. If they have negative self-talk, I'm like, don't do that. Life will be hard enough on you without you helping. Don't help. Don't help.
You just remind me, there's a really, really interesting tennis study that, and I'm forgetting his name. He recently passed away, but he was an all-time tennis coach. And one of the first things, he had a facility here in Florida. I'm in Orlando, but just right down the street in Tampa. And one of the first things that he would do with any of his clients is he would tape a microphone to their chest, and he would have them hit a couple balls, and play a match. And he would ask them, hey, whatever you're thinking, just say it out loud.
Oh, interesting.
And so he would record these conversations that these players would be basically having with themselves, and then play it back to them.
Yeah.
And the really interesting part was these players would hear themselves say, you suck. Like, what an idiot. Why would you hit it like that?
Oh,
Why would?
yeah.
And then he would have them listen to the whole thing, and then he would ask them, if you are coaching yourself, is this the advice that you would be giving?
Oh, I love it. I love
that
it.
person.
That's cool.
And it was, and like, I love that study because we oftentimes, I don't know if we're not aware or if we simply want to ignore it, but that self-talk, we almost push it off to the side. And we're like, oh, it's not there. It's not, but you don't realize how much weight it carries until you actually hear yourself saying it.
You believe yourself. You believe
Right.
yourself. It's that classic line. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great study. You brought that, the tennis study. I did a post about this. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a study, it's a brutal study, but a psychological study they did with rats. I don't know if you've seen the post I did about that, but it kind of talks about hope and definitely talks to mindset. This scientist did a study with let's say he took the first control group of 100 rats. It's pitiless, so it's kind of rough to listen to, but he put them in a bucket of water and he'd basically wait until they drowned. They'd go to the bottom. And with that first peer group, it was about 8 to call it 15 minutes was the longest any rat made it without finally going under and be like, I'm done, and would fail and would just give up. With the second control group, they put him in. Whenever the rat expressed the behavior where it went down, it looked like it gave it up, the scientist or one of the researchers would reach up, grab it, take it out, let it recover a little bit, and then put it back in. It's impossible to believe this, but the amount of time they'd spend in the second time before they drowned usually went up to about 60 hours.
Wow.
Days. And so you're like 8 to 15 minutes, but when the rat recognized it had a chance, a hope, a glimmer of light, an opportunity to win, it would stay for an inexplicable amount of time fighting it out. And so I think that has a lot to do with, that could be an external force, a coach, a mentor, a pastor, somebody that says that right thing. It's why I always try and say good things to people, man, particularly young people. I just try and say something nice, something motivating, because you never know if it could be that one thing that's going to take them to a totally different place, and I had a lot of that. I really was, I had some tough coaches, certainly, and I had some tough teachers, but I had a lot of great coaches. And I had, like I said, tremendous parents that just instilled that mindset of like, if nothing else, trust yourself, believe in yourself. And if I can give that to my girls, man, I will have done my job for sure. And I'm seeing it. Our youngest is big into musical theater. She's in 8th grade. She's doing a high school performance right now. And I'll get emotional talking about it. But my bride brought her to the audition the other night, and she was as nervous as a human being can be, and has to go into a room with nothing but high schoolers, some of them seniors. She's in 8th grade. She's the only kid that got invited that's 8th grade. And my bride saw her walk up the door and pause and was like, oh no, oh no. And she saw her literally take a big breath and open that door and walk in. And I'm just like, you are literally going to be fine in life. Like, if you can do that, you're good. You're good.
I love that.
There's a lot of kids that would turn around.
I love that. That's fantastic.
That's cool.
So speaking of mice and studies, I'll bring up this one, and I'll ask you a question. There was this study where they would have these mice, and I'm forgetting exactly how they set it up, but in essence, they would attach these mice to a spring, and then they would waft in the smell of cheese, and they would measure how with how much force the mouse would pull towards the smell of cheese. And then they did the same study, but then they put the scent of a cat behind the mouse, and then they would measure the same force. Which scenario do you think the mouse pulled harder?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it'd be the survival of the cat, pushing them that level. But
Yep,
yeah,
it was the cat.
yeah,
And so basically the takeaway and what the research has said is that a lot of times in life, people tend to run away from things that they're fearful of
yeah,
with a lot more force than run towards
yeah,
things that maybe
yeah.
they want. I'm curious, as you're going through Hell Week and through SEAL training, what was pushing you? Was it the cat, or was it this idea of getting the cheese at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways it wasn't the cat. I mean, if the cat was there, it was just my own internal like locus of hating the idea of giving up or failing. Like I set to the task of reaching a goal. If I feel like I've built the systems in place to meet that end state. If that didn't happen, there's probably that probably would have drove me. That would be the cat behind me. I think it was much more forward looking. I knew I wanted to be part of this elite team as soon as I showed up there. And like I said, saw the peer group, like, oh, everybody's running hard all the time here. These are my guys. Like, I want to be part of this. Like, it'd be a disaster if I didn't get to become part of this and get to the team and see if it is what I think it's going to be. And it proved to be exactly what I thought it was going to be. So I don't think I felt a big, fear or push from behind. I think it was a more, forward movement towards, where I wanted to end up and where I wanted to serve. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's kind of wrap up the training part
Sure.
of your journey and talk about Hell Week, because I think a lot of people have heard about it, a lot of people have read about it. There's YouTube videos, but just for the audience, can you break down what Hell Week actually is, and then on a daily basis, like what are you going through?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a day takes on a totally different concept because your day becomes a 24-hour day. Hell Week starts on a Sunday, it ends on Friday. You are on a 24-hour clock for that entire duration. 3 sets of instructor staffs run 3 shifts of that day because they need to get rest where you won't be getting rest. Probably you've been in training already for 2.5, 3 months. 100 some odd people have already quit the class, let alone made it to this point. And then they throw this thing at you, and you're just in a boat crew, and you're cold, wet, sandy, miserable, running with a boat on your head, paddling through the surf, physical evolution, surf torture, freezing, thinking you're going to die, and they're trying to kill you from Sunday until Friday. You don't sleep at all from Sunday night until Wednesday. I think Wednesday you get, maybe a half-hour nap, hour-long nap. You get another one on Thursday, and then you finish on Friday. So by Thursday, everybody's pretty much a zombie. It looks like The Walking Dead. I mean, even watching a class walk up to finish, everybody's hunched over because their hip flexors are so tight and their body's so beat down. But again, I've got a pretty cool, my dad sent me, maybe remember my brother found it a year or so ago. I called my dad on Sunday, and you can hear my voice clear like we're talking around. I was like, hey, Dad, Hell Week starts tonight. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. My boat crew's ready. We're prepped, and I got a bunch of studs in my boat. It's going to be a good week. Hope you don't hear from me until Friday. And then he's got the message on Friday where my voice, I'm like, hey, Dad, I made it. I just need to get some sleep. And I hang up, But I think, again, the people that are made to do that job are just excited for Hell Week to come. You're just like, let's go. It's the real first line in the sand of, if you get past that, unless you're terrible underwater and panic underwater, you're probably going to make it. So it's a huge transition. You wear white T-shirts in training with your name on it when you're pre-Hell Week. When you go post-Hell Week, you get a brown T-shirt. I assure you, no human on earth has ever been given a T-shirt that meant more than just going from a white Hanes to a brown Hanes with your name on it, knowing Hell Week was behind you. Because if you fail in the future in training, then you won't go back before Hell Week unless you totally leave the program, have to come all the way through. But no, it's just constant harassment, physical evolutions, running, moving. I mean, you run 6 miles a day just going to chow, just going to get food. But it's it's just one of the most relentless weeks of training. And again, I think if your mindset's right, you're just kind of jonesing to do it, because once you do it, you don't need to do it again. Although some people manage to have to do it multiple times because something went wrong and they had to go back. Yeah.
Well, what was the worst part? Because we hear about the surf torture, the lack of sleep, the
Yeah.
underwater stuff. What was the worst part?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways the worst part was trying to keep, the guys you really cared about in it and motivated. I mean, the best of them you didn't have to, like my best friends, I didn't have to be like, "Hey, pick your spirits up." But we had a couple guys that made it, a couple guys that didn't make it, that I think, but for a teammate throwing an arm around and be like, "Hey, let's give it 10 more steps and see what happens," they might not have made it. So that's a huge focus and a hard part of just trying to keep them motivated. The cold's the thing. The cold's the thing. And you kind of, there's winter classes and summer classes. Summer, the water temp's way warmer, the air temp's staggeringly warmer. They probably beat you up worse running. I mean, I know they do, but like, if you're a winter hell class, you get like extra points. I was a February hell class. That's probably the coldest week you can go through it. And it's hard to describe the cold. I mean, everybody's been cold. If you ever truly been wet cold, that's a different sport entirely. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school in San Diego, and I'll tell you, there were a couple of times where we go to the beach in the winter, and like
Yeah.
it just took dipping your toes in the water. You're like, that is that is rather cold. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
So
No joke. There's no
yeah,
joke. Yeah. Yeah.
it's bad. So Rourke, so you go through Hell Week, you go through Buds, you graduate. I think it was Buds class 224.
Yep.
What was that moment like for you? What was there a sense of relief, or was it all right? Let's get after it.
Yeah, I think it's still stuck in the world of kind of purpose and kind of driving forward. Absolutely, it's an exciting day. I mean, the graduation's great. You have family come in, and I had three of my teammates from Syracuse show up, and my dad, brother, my mom, everybody's there, and it's a pretty special day. I mean, you've definitely achieved a real milestone. In that era, you didn't get your trident. You weren't a SEAL yet with the insignia. You had to go do advanced training out at one of your teams, either West Coast or East Coast, to earn that next phase of actually becoming a SEAL. But it's a major, major hurdle. I mean, unless you literally mess up, do something dumb, get a DUI, just act like an idiot, you're gonna probably become a SEAL. And so, yeah, that day was special. Definitely one of those days you'll never forget. A pretty cool experience. And you're either in your dress blues. We were a summer class because we were winter and hell week, so we were dress whites. You're looking sharp and feeling good, and then you head off to the team. And I went to the East Coast. You either stay in San Diego and do one of the teams on the West Coast, or you go East Coast. I went East and started out at Team 4, and that's where the journey really begins.
And so that's where the fun begins. And I believe your first deployment was to South America.
Yeah.
You described, kind of that sense of, I thought we were going to be, hunting the bad guys, but
Yeah.
you get sent down to South America. What was that as your first deployment? What was that like?
Yeah, it was great. Like I said, having some pre 9/11 rounds, because you sort of had some time to just build, a level of capability, and your kind of reputation within the team and what people think of you as an operator, and just kind of sharpen the sword and get ready for what's to come. And so those were great deployments. I mean, it was kind of running amok. We did some counter drug, counter narcotic stuff, but nothing. I mean, normal people would think it's dangerous, not by our standards. And it was great. Got to bebop all around Central and South America, and have a good time with a bunch of buddies, and, get in trouble and antics down there doing that, and hopefully not to embarrass our country and end your career before it started. And then on the kind of second round of one of those deployments is when 9/11 unfolded. And then it was just like, wow, the world is, shifted on its axis. And I'm glad we're ready, because it's coming. It's coming.
One of the more interesting parts of your book, I actually wrote this down, was when you got deployed out to Iraq. You said that you never felt more peaceful than when you arrived in Iraq, which is a dichotomy, because most people would think I'm entering the war zone. Like, this is pretty surreal, but you were at peace. Explain that.
Yeah, I would say peace and lack of stress. And the reason I say that is there's one kind of practical part of it, which is when you deploy to a combat zone to go do that job, there's nothing else to focus on. You don't need to worry about your phone bill, the water pipes bursting, father-in-law's giving you a hard time, your dad or mom's nagging. I mean, name any regular trapping of your daily life, paying the bills, keeping anything going. That's gone. I mean, you just don't need to focus on any of it because your job is the end of that gun, the mission, and taking care of, in my case as an officer, taking care of the troops, taking care of the teammate, and making sure I held up my end of the deal. So I just felt tremendous, lack of stress because it was like I get to focus on that which I hope to do. The peace, I think, came from, it was almost like a relief. An athlete will understand this more than a non-athlete, but imagine if you played a sport, like you and I both played water polo. Imagine you practiced every day and never got to play a game. You'd be a lunatic. I mean, you'd just be like, what am I doing this for? And it's not to take away from any of the guys that did 30-year careers post, Vietnam and, unless they went to Grenada or Panama or one of those small incursions, they just didn't get to do the job. I mean, I'm sure they love their time and were part of this team, but I know they're jealous of our guys because it's like, look, we got to see the bear, man. It lit off and we got to go hunt bad guys for 20 years. And, I got 10 years of going after bad guys. So I think it was just almost like okay, let's go play the game, which it's not a game, but it is. It's high stakes, it's high stakes cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians and playing with catastrophic potential results. But I think as you mentioned about, Jordan and being at play, giving him that direction, I actually think it's something I try and focus even, as I'm not as young and fast and quick as I once was. I'm at best when I'm at play. I like to hunt. I like to fish. I like to, I like doing these. And when I'm talking about the things I believe in, when I'm hunting and doing that, I'm at play. And I think everybody's got a kid inside them that wants to be playing. And so if you can make that your job or your life, then I think you're going to meet with a lot of pleasure and satisfaction. And I think when stuff becomes a grind and you feel like you have a job, that's pretty rough. Yeah. So I was happy to be there. I was happy to finally get to go do the job.
When I read about stories like yours, Rorke, and when I talk to people who have served, and certainly when I read books like yours, or movies are not the most accurate description, but it gives you kind of a sense of just the I guess the importance of what you're doing, but then also just the idea that like this could be it. Like the next time you go out of your camp, God forbid something could happen.
Sure.
IED goes off, snipers up on the roof that maybe you didn't see, and that's it. How do you did that ever cross your mind when you were kind of out on deployment? And how did you kind of deal with those intrusive thoughts as you were out?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I had very little of that was intrusive. I mean, I think I went into it very well armed, as I described from the readings and stuff I grew up with. I think I had have a pretty philosophical bent. I've got I've got a faith component to my life that helps guide certain beliefs and things that I can anchor myself in. To be honest, I'll back up a little bit. I remember a conversation I had with my brother, which was one of the toughest I've ever had, because our dad's dad, our grandfather, was killed in the Pacific Theater of World War II as a B-24 Liberator guy, which very few of those guys came home. And there was something in my heart that was like, God, please don't let me fall on the battlefield and have my dad's life be bookended by his dad dying in combat and his son dying in combat. I swear that was more stressful than me ever worrying about my own health and safety. But no, I think everybody's personality metabolizes it a little bit different and deals with it a little bit different. I felt like I was in the right place. I mean, when guns started, cracking off and bullets went whipping past us and bombs went off behind you, around you, in front of you, I just went to work. I just felt like I activated more than, clammed up or felt like I wasn't in the right place. I really felt like I kind of found my rhythm out there and knew exactly what to do. And that I was with people that I knew were never going to quit me. We're going to stay in it till the very end. I mean, you have very strange conversations in an elite combat unit. I mean, when you actually sit with friends on a rooftop, we had a couple situations where it looked like, the enemy was going to get an advantage. And it was like, look, I figure we're all in agreement. We're going to go through the last bullet we have and then throw a couple grenades, maybe keep one each in our hand, pull a knife and swing until it's over. And let's not end up in an orange jumpsuit. I'd rather them bring me back and, have a funeral than be a prisoner or something like that. And it's not a normal conversation that most people are going to engage in, but it all seemed very appropriate. to the world we're in. So I didn't have a lot of fear that I felt like I had to metabolize or deal with. I felt like I was trained exceptionally well and was good at that job and knew how to do well by the boys, by the mission, and get it done. And by all accounts, that proved true.
Yeah, I mean, I just can imagine sitting around with your buddies and talking about potentially the way that you want to go out. I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
that's surreal.
And look, when I had several teammates killed in combat. Fortunately, nobody on my immediate assault team, but then plenty of buddies. I mean, out of my buds class, you can look at several people that were killed in combat. And I say this, I don't know how many people would understand this, but I've attended. I mean, I don't even know how many funerals I've attended. But I don't think there's any warrior. Like, I make a distinction between a warrior and a soldier, and I don't say this disrespectfully. I think there are people that want to get a job, they want to be in the military, good pay, good benefits, work towards a retirement, learn a skill set, maybe transitions into their next life. Great. A warrior, in my mind, is something a little different. It's the one that runs towards the guns. It's the one that wants to go chase dragons and, rescue damsels and be in a fight and see what it's all about. I think when a warrior sees another warrior, their funeral, sees that flag draped over that coffin, you almost feel a little bit of jealousy. Just a little bit of jealousy of being like, I probably won't go out that well. Like, that is a gunfighter's life. That dude died with his boots on, slinging lead at a bad guy in a savage part of the world. Like, that's about, that dude went straight to Valhalla and is partying with Odin right now. And, I hope I live a long time, get to see grandkids and all that good stuff. But I have a little bit of jealousy of the guys that transition there because it's kind of the ultimate. But no, I just, I really felt like I was in the right place. That's I can't say it much more eloquently than that.
And another interesting thing that you mentioned is that when you were in a gunfight, you felt like a quarterback who was in the zone.
Yeah.
And you kind of tuned out everything else, and your sole focus was just what was happening with your gun and with
Yep.
the enemy.
Yep.
And I just found it so fascinating that in a situation like that, where you got a million different things that you could be focused on and a million different things vying for your attention, you are solely focused on the singular task at hand.
Yeah. I mean, look, that level of intensity tends to drive you towards, fight or flight or focus. I mean, it doesn't give you a lot of option other than sucking your thumb or curling up in a ball somewhere, which we don't practice. And very few soldiers do. I mean, even non-elite forces are usually like, let's follow our training, let's move, maneuver, and get in a good position to, return fire, take the high ground, and win the fight. But no, we practice it enough leading into that, the first time somebody jumped up and started shooting at me, it didn't feel like the first time. It's just like the amount of practice shots a great shooter in basketball or any sport does. It's not the first time they've pulled that trigger, so it just felt mechanical and let's do the job. After the fact, you have to reflect and metabolize the, taking another life and the intensity of that and dealing with, I guess, how your emotions will fall out from that. But no, in my mind, it was very easy to focus on the task. It also doesn't hurt when you have exceptional teammates that basically need almost nothing from you. I mean, I usually had to pull guys in. I didn't have to ever push somebody out. Our guys are just aggressive and creative and capable. So it was much more making sure they didn't get too far ahead of themselves than ever saying, hey, somebody do something. It's just such an exceptional team. The leaders are there for much less of a purpose than leaders in other organizations. Yeah, it's a very different job. In many ways, my job was almost protect the enemy for my guys and not let them go too hard.
Love it. Another thing that I always forget too is through video games and movies, it's always clear cut. Here are the good guys, here's the enemy, and it's very easy to spot. And anytime there's gunfire, a gunfight or something, you know exactly where it's coming from. But you rolling down the streets of Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, you truly have no idea. And then add on top of that you have all these people that you don't know the language very well, you don't know the culture, and you don't know who could be on your side, who might be, spying for the other, for the enemy. It's yeah, just crazy. I
It
guess
can
all
be
that to say it's crazy.
it can be unsettling. Some of that unknown and some of that trying to read the tea leaves, that can be unsettling. And you just have to trust in your instincts. And I do think you develop a different sense when you're over that. And I haven't met anyone that doesn't feel that. Certainly warriors, like I talked about, that you almost become a different animal. You smell things differently, you see things differently, you hear things differently. Our team was we were very vocal about it. I was like, dude, if the hair stands up in the back of your neck, yell out to everyone it's time to duck, and we'll duck. Worst thing is we get back up. But that happened multiple times and bad things happened. And we were like almost prepped for it to happen. Just that like sixth sense of being ready for what was coming. But no, it's a complex environment and a simple environment all at the same time. It's a strange experience.
Yeah. Rorke, as we finish up here, a couple more questions to round us out. One, I wanted to come back to something that you said earlier. You said that this period of time with the United States Special Operations will be remembered, alongside some of the greats as samurais and others of history. Why do you say that?
I just think in every generation, I don't know how to capture that. It's not every living generation, but in every age, let's call it, of warfare, there are warriors that rise to a different place. The samurai are a prime example. The Spartans in the Peloponnesian Wars and throughout there, Rome and its legions and the different legions within that could do their job. I just think there's warrior cultures that the Huns, when they were running around and literally took enough people off the planet that changed the CO2 levels when they were running amok. I just think every age of warfare there will be people, and in specific some very specific units that will be like, that was something different. And I think special operations in the global war on terror in this generation will be that group. I think they'll get studied and looked at and be like, this was a different crew. I mean, they trained at a different level. They attacked the enemy and the problem sets in a different way. The brotherhood that was built through those teams seems absolutely otherworldly, and there was a tremendous commitment to the fight and to the mission. And I think that will, like I said, I think it'll be breathed in the same breath as some of those other truly legendary forces. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because you've after serving, you stuck around and you're part of the SEAL training, and I don't know if you're still part of that today, but
only when I finish up my career.
So you're part of training. How have you seen the training, the people who come out? Has that changed at all in recent years, or is it still the same?
It never changes. I mean, it changes a lot with like peaks and valleys and windows of time and where the priorities are and who's sitting in the front office and who's, running the big defense, running defense, or the Joint Chiefs, or whatever. That stuff cycles. I think if you sat me down with a samurai, a Spartan, a Roman legion guy, a Civil War soldier running through the hills of North Carolina, we would be thick as thieves talking about all the exact same problems. Where are you getting chapped? Are your feet hurting? Can you keep your weapon up and running? What are the tactics? How do you move on the enemy? I mean, you could have a conversation with any one of those people over all of history, and they would have more in common than most people have with their family. It's a very unique thing. I mean, you depart from this normal part of the world where violence and the norms of civil behavior disappear, and it's very exciting. It's very intense. It's very damaging to a lot of people. I'm super lucky. I saw some unbelievably horrific things, and I sleep like a baby. I metabolized it well. I'm healthy and, feel good. And I've told my bride and my friends, I'm like, hey, I ever start doing some kooky stuff, tell me, 'cause I don't want to like go down some bad path. But, people ask me about PTSD. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I would have paid them to let me go do it again. I enjoyed it so much, the team I was with. But no, I running, training, it's always going to cycle in the end with our program until they change the standard. You're going to get the same exceptional product out the back end. And it's a unique individual that seeks that out and is willing to pay the tax to play that game.
Absolutely. Rorke, I have thoroughly enjoyed this time. I'm not going to keep you hostage any longer. So we'll wrap it up with my final question here. And I think I think you'll tie a lot of what we talked about today, but also kind of give some more insight as to who Rorke Denver is. So you mentioned you believe in a lot of things. I was hoping that you could list off some of those things, some of those mantras that you believe in.
I believe in trusting yourself. I believe in the fates. I mean, I believe in a God. I also believe in those fates where, like, whether you ascribe it to God or something like that, I saw people do everything right on the battlefield and it go wrong. And I saw people ever do everything perfectly or just terribly wrong and it'd be just fine. And so I think a lot of our story is written, and what you need to do is just keep yourself fit, mentally, physically, spiritually sharp, and kind of ready for what's in front of you. And then what will happen will happen. I've only done so much in my life by purpose. A ton of it has just kind of rolled out in front of me that I didn't have as much control, even if I thought I did. And I think, I guess the thing I believe in is just go after it. I mean, if you have something you want to attack and go do it. What are you waiting for? I mean, it is. Trust me, I saw people's lives end way too early and probably wish they had done more. And go do it. This time isn't promised, and you got, as far until we prove on the other side of our lives what's there. You might as well go all out and give everything you have in the time you have. And I'd say along with that, find some good friends, man, and hold on tight. If you got a good crew, you're gonna have a great ride. If you surround yourself with people that are toxic or bring you down, there's nothing that can make that good. So no, man, I think it's just go get in adventures, go put your chips on the table, be willing to fail, and you'll go a lot farther than if you just sat back and were one of those timid souls.
Well, I think we can all learn a lot from your daughter as well. That when we're faced with something that we're maybe scared of, all it takes is maybe a deep breath and a confidence that you can go out and do it.
Yeah, I've heard
Um,
that great thing about fear where it's like, it's an inch deep and a mile wide. It just
mm,
looks like it's this huge thing in front of you that you can't do. Then you step in and you're like, oh, I can do this. I mean, there's
right.
very few people that, take a risk on something and then are like, wow, that really handed me my ass. It's usually like, oh man, I can do this. And most people just never take that step, man. They never take that step, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Rorke, well, thank you so much for your time, man. I really, truly can't thank you enough. It was such an honor after reading your book and reading up on you. It's such an honor to get to talk to you and learn a little bit more. Where can people find you and find more of your work?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm up on all the socials. I mean, I think it's all Rorke Denver, my name, first name, last name. And I know I've got a YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook. I'm terrible with all the handles. I'm sure my team can send it to you before you post stuff up. But no, you can find me pretty easy. And I'm starting to punch a lot more content out there. I do a lot of speaking with kind of corporate events, but I'm starting to put at least 3 times a week a longer form story, a shorter form story or concept, and then usually a question to get people thinking and some pictures and stuff like that. But yeah, people find me easy enough, and no, I hope they enjoy it.
Love it, Rorke. All those links will be in the description of this episode. So if you're interested more in Rorke, his journey, and the stuff that he's sharing, all that stuff will be in there. Also, a link to buy Damn Few. Again, fantastic read.
I
I remember
appreciate.
reading it 5 years ago and thinking this is a good book, and then I reread it. Actually, finished it just today,
Oh, it's
um, and I was like, it was a damn good book.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it.
Rorke, thanks again for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again real soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.